Hello and welcome back to The Mentors. This is Vadim
and Sergey,
and you're listening to our weekly segment called the 5-Minute Pick-Me-Up, where we tell you stories to motivate you for the weeks to come.
And as you know, we've spent the last 12 days in España, and we wanted to record this 5-minute pick-me-up on our last day here of the trip because we actually had a lot of inspiring experiences. But one of the most inspiring things that happened to us that we wanted to tell you about, that we learned a lot from, is our visit to
La Sagrada Familia.
Yes, La Sagrada Familia, and this is a famous basilica by the renowned architect Antoni Gaudi, and he had a very, very interesting life. But what we want to talk about is this specific piece of work that he created in about the late 1800s. He was born in 1850s, and he was an architect in Catalonia, which is around the region where Barcelona is.
And if you walk around Barcelona right now, you can't miss his architecture. You can't miss the various different buildings that he's designed. Clearly, the wealthy people that hired him to create beautiful palaces and really use him for his unique taste. It's very different than anything you've ever seen. Just Google Antoni Gaudi and you'll see his taste in buildings. Don't look like anything that you've ever seen in this world.
Yeah, since they didn't have Instagram back then, basically the way they showed their wealth is by hiring a famous architect to build the most opulent apartment building or whatever possible, and people would walk by and be like, who lives here? And so this guy was starting to get known for his architecture even in his 20s, and he was working as an apprentice for this other architect who was hired by a congregation to build a church, a basilica, in Barcelona. But he had some disagreements with this congregation, and because Antoni Gaudi at 31 years old was already known as somebody that did good work, he was brought on to design this church that would be called the Sagrada Familia, the Holy Family. And he completely changed the design. He was known to have some crazy designs. If you don't know who he is or haven't seen this particular building, you should totally just Google it right now. You're going to see how crazy it is. But he took on this project and he ended up working on it, basically dedicating the rest of his life to this project. 43 years it took him to design and start building this basilica.
So Sergey and I wanted to tell you his story because we did the tourist thing and we walked through his house that's not too far from the La Sagrada Familia and followed his path that he took every single day from his house down to the basilica, and actually went inside and were in awe of what he was able to create. It's a massive building. It is going to eventually have 18 massive columns, and it's taken 100 years to create. Now, part of that is because there was a civil war in Spain, and there was a pause, essentially, on the construction. But when he died, only a quarter of it was completed. But that's how much he cared about this project that he was working on, is that he didn't even care that he knew that it couldn't be completed in his lifetime. But it was his life's work, and he was going to get it as far as he possibly could.
Now, he had this quote that was shown in the basilica, and I had to take a picture of this quote because I loved it so much. And it says, "To do things right, first you need love, then technique." So even though this was a man that had amazing technique and a very unique style, he knew that love for the work and passion behind it was critical, especially if you're going to achieve something as important as this that's going to transcend generations. And for him, he was a very pious man. He was very Catholic, a believer, and it was an important part of his life. He went to church every single day, and that was the impetus. When he was given this project, he knew that he was going to dedicate his whole life to it.
Now, the story is a little bit more than that, of course. He was incredibly meticulous. He was incredibly process-oriented. Especially as he got older, he had a lot of regimens. He woke up and had the same exact vegetarian meal every single day. He did his prayers. He walked to work, and he got to work and actually worked really hard every single day. But the other side of the story is he was also really good at motivating his team. Now, we'll talk about it in about a second, but I think what the quote that Sergey explained says is that basically expertise doesn't guarantee greatness. You have to be passionate. You have to have deep love and deep care about what you're working on in order to actually create something big.
And for him, if you actually look at some photos of the Sagrada Familia, you will see that there are just so many tiny little details. There's so many basically sculptures within the facades of this building that required so much talent. There is no way that this person would be able to do this alone. He required the support of tons of artists, of architects, of, stonemasons. I mean, you name it. He required a lot of that kind of help, and there's no way that this project would be completed and continued over the course of 100 years had he not inspired people with his designs and his passion for this work.
And it actually turns out that part of the reason why he was promoted to lead this project, to be the lead architect, is because he was uniquely good at inspiring not only other architects, but other artists and sculptors and the actual builders themselves, and making all these tons of moving pieces work well together in synchrony. So obviously it took a lot of detailed work and it took a lot of passion, but then also his ability to motivate teams and bring them all together to work towards this common goal is ultimately what started to bring this project to life and made it into a massive, massive project. It wasn't initially as big of a project, but he cared about it so much that it became essentially a massive part of Catalonia.
So as you listen to this 5-minute pick-me-up today and this week, if you're inspired by this story, and if you seek to create something that is going to leave a big impact, change the world in some way, or stick around for when you're gone, think of Antoni Gaudi. The fact that he only got to see one facade of this building built in his lifetime, and now 100 years later, it's going to be completed by 2026. They're hoping the 100th anniversary of his death. So they're really trying to finish this right now. And we were so fortunate to be able to see this work pretty much complete. We want to come back to Barcelona and see it when it is completed. But as you think about it, think about what gives you meaning. What is it in your life that you really have love for? There are plenty of things that you probably have love for. And if you think of those things, that's going to bring you closer to the thing that maybe you should be spending your time on, because then you're going to be happy dedicating your life to it, whether it takes the next 5 years, 15 years, or 43 years like it did for Antoni Gaudi. In the last 15 years, he dedicated solely to this project.
And we found this process really inspirational for us. So maybe for you, visiting a museum and looking at an artist's work and learning about their history and learning about their rituals, right? We recently did a rebroadcast of an episode called Daily Rituals, where we talked about different writers and artists and creators and their daily work, their daily rituals that made them great. Maybe this week you can go to a museum and learn about somebody new and get that inspiration to do the work yourself every single day to try to achieve that greatness.
In the last couple of days of our time in Barcelona, I actually got a replica of the Sagrada Familia from a gift store. They have them in every single gift shop there. And I got one so that I can put it somewhere in my apartment to act as inspiration for myself to focus on building something big and being okay with it taking more time maybe than I thought.
That's it for this week's episode of the 5-Minute Pick-Me-Up, and we'll see you on Wednesday.